Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. You are watching the live stream of the recording of an actual radio show. We record 4 blocks of audio. We send those 4 blocks of audio to Josh Brown and his awesome team at His Productions, who takes those audio files, produces them, formats them, gets them ready to be distributed amongst our wonderful radio partners. At that point, once the finished product gets uploaded to their server, we pull those files, put them back together, and release it as a podcast. So what you are watching this evening is the live stream recording of the Outlaw Radio Show. So we're so glad that you've joined us, that you're watching. Very cool to see over the last few weeks how all of this has evolved. So really, beginning of last year, middle of last year, we started videotaping the recording of the show, producing it, and then releasing it. And then early this fall, we were able to kind of transition into actually doing a live stream. The Lord blessed us with the equipment and the technology to make that happen. And we launched as a result. We've been on Facebook, again, facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. But we were able to launch a YouTube channel. The easiest way to find the YouTube channel is outlawradio.live. Again, outlawradio.live. And so we stream 8 o'clock Wednesday nights, both to YouTube, our YouTube channel, as well as to Facebook. And it's been very cool to just watch, over the last couple months, the audience grow. More people are subscribing to the YouTube channel. We are able to track the amount of people that are watching. Very, very cool. We're blessed by it. I would encourage you, if you do watch on YouTube, please be a subscriber. I know that might seem like a very simple thing to do, but it does help raise our profile and kind of searchability on YouTube. Best way to think of YouTube is that it's really a search engine for video content. And so the more subscribers you have, the more people that talk, the higher you rise on the search parameters. And so encourage you to do that. Also follow us on Facebook, like the video. What's great about this is that you can leave a comment as you're watching, and we can interact while we do this. I take questions between each of the blocks, comments, feedback. I am joined, as always, by Creighton Vaughn and Nicholas Monty. Fellas,
hello.
Welcome.
What's up?
So I'm Creighton. He's Nick.
So Creighton is kind of the gatekeeper to the live stream, and so he's monitoring both Facebook comments as well as the YouTube comments, and so you'll be directly communicating with him. Nick kind of functions as our resident audience member, and so Nick is kind of sitting, listening, processing the content of the show, and then provides his own questions and feedback and insights between blocks. And Nick, as you've kind of gotten more comfortable and acclimated to what we're doing, I even dropped you a note after the show last week that you're really contributing a lot to the finished product, and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much for doing it. We are short Deal Daddy Derek.
Yes, we are.
So we are short.
It's just the two of us.
So it's just the three amigos tonight. We are short Derek. We wish him the best. I don't know what he's doing, but he was like, I can't make it tonight, so no big deal. So it'll just be the three of us. And tonight we're going to talk about Rush Limbaugh. And so, if you are conservative, if you drive around and you listen to daytime talk radio, if you listen to any talk radio, you're familiar with Rush Limbaugh. Tonight's episode is going to deal with Rush Limbaugh, but I'm going to really kind of pivot and build off of kind of his bio to a much larger conversation. Rush is famous for saying talent on loan from God, and yet there's something to that is applicable to all of us. And so I want to try to have taken a week ago today. Rush went to be with the Lord. We'll talk about that a little bit. February 17th, 2021, he lost his battle with stage 4 cancer. And I've taken the week, kind of processed what I wanted to say about it. And again, I'm not doing a show really on Rush Limbaugh, but I'm going to use Rush Limbaugh and his life to point out, I think, some very important lessons for all of us. And I think we'll be able to derive some good applications. So any thoughts right from the beginning, fellas?
I got our first YouTube comment.
Okay.
So everyone say hi to Jennifer, our biggest fan. Hi, Jennifer.
On
Jennifer.
YouTube. So she's watching on YouTube.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, Jennifer, thank you for watching. And hopefully see us one Sunday soon with your mom. Still been praying for her. But Nick, you got any thoughts?
Not right now. Let's dive into.
Did you ever, I know Creighton, you'd probably only listen to Rush Limbaugh when you happened to be in my vehicle between noon and 3 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm vaguely aware of who he is. Vaguely.
Okay. And then Nick, you being in construction, did you ever listen at all to Rush Limbaugh, your father?
So Rush Limbaugh was one of the people that I would turn to if something pinnacle or something big was happening in politics that I needed to be around, like elections or anything like that. I would also always switch to like 95.5 or whatever it was on or now is on. I don't remember what station it is on.
WSB. 750
I would listen
AM.
to him just to get his take on it because I agreed with a lot of things he was saying because it always came from a Christian perspective. It seemed like to me.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to kind of unpack that because, I don't know how much of a Christian perspective it was for a lot of time. And I did a lot of research this week into kind of the man behind the microphone, the man behind the persona. And so let's get into this. We've got, as always, 4 blocks of audio. First block is 14 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and key up some music and let's get going. You guys ready?
Ready.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams, and I pastor a church located just outside of Athens, Georgia. The name of the church is Calvary 316, mainly because we're located off of Highway 316, but there's also some pretty good 316 verses in Scripture. If you're local, let me encourage you to come be my guest one Sunday morning. Our service is at 10:30. if maybe you aren't local, but you're looking for a good church you can watch online, our live stream, you can find it on YouTube at calvary316.live, or you can watch our live stream, facebook.com/calvary316. So if you're local, be our guest in person, 10:30 Sunday morning. If you're not local, be our guest digitally through our live stream, again, 10:30 on Sunday mornings. You can learn more about the church, about what we believe, what we do, what our vision and mission is by checking out calvary316.tv. I'm currently in a verse-by-verse, chapter-by-chapter study through the book of Revelation. If that interests you, you can go to calvary316.tv/revelation of the King for all of the video and the audio. If you'd like to access the sermon notes, go to c316.tv. It's kind of our media archive. Again, YouTube channel, calvary316.live. I do hope wherever you're listening or however you're listening, whether you're listening on the radio via one of our wonderful radio partners, this is a nationally syndicated radio show, or maybe you're listening on the podcast. Every episode of the Outlaw Radio Show is podcasted in its entirety from beginning to end. You can find our podcast really wherever podcasts are found. Apple, Google, even Spotify. We're on Spotify. If, let's say, you have a platform other than the three big ones and you're having a hard time finding us, drop us an email, info@outlawradio.org, and we'll do what we got to do to be on the platform to make it as easy as possible for you to listen. So if you're listening on the radio and you can't stay with us through the entirety of the show, no worries. Find the podcast, and you can pick up where you had to leave off. Regardless, I do hope you stay with me over the next hour as we seek to deconstruct the negative perception that the world has of Christians by boldly discussing today's relevant topics in an honest and genuine way. I do encourage you, if you're listening, again, radio or podcast, we live stream the recording of the Outlaw Radio Show. So what you're listening to right now is pre-recorded. We sit down in the studio, record 4 blocks of audio. We send that audio to His Productions, who produces it for radio. We then take those files, produce it for podcasting. So what you're listening to right now is not live, but we do live stream the show. So the recording of the show is live streamed every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And really the man that is behind the live stream, behind the cameras, the gatekeeper, so to speak, my partner in crime, Creighton Vaughn. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
You doing well, man? You having a good week?
Yeah, more or less. It's another week, driving a lot, working a lot, living.
Living the dream.
You know it.
So last week when we were recording the show that we did on kind of the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism, we had that show was fully prepped. It was ready. It was in the docket. We had already kind of released a bit of advertisement that that's what the subject matter was going to be. Unbeknownst to me, earlier that day on the Rush Limbaugh show, Catherine Limbaugh, Rush's wife, came on the air and informed the 20 million people that listened to the Rush Limbaugh show that Rush had passed away, that he had lost his fight with stage 4 cancer. And he is kind of the godfather of modern radio. A lot of things that were kind of stirring within me, a lot of things that I wanted to talk about even last Wednesday, but kind of felt like, and I think you agreed with me, that let's let it kind of simmer for a week, take some time. Let's keep the subject matter of what we were addressing static. Let's not change it. And but then, a week. So tonight we would address that. You're not a big radio fan. That's correct.
I think in the past year I've listened to radio one time, and it's because my phone was dead on my way home from work.
So most of the time, and you're not abnormal for most millennials or Gen Z. That, I mean, you consume your media how?
Bluetooth headphones and my phone.
And your phone, and with your phone, it's mainly podcasts, YouTube channels, things of that nature.
Exactly. It's podcast, YouTube, and YouTube music.
So as far as the radio dial, not exactly a medium that you've ever really explored or been exposed to, just not in your repertoire.
Not really.
Now, one of the things that I do think is interesting is that doesn't mean that what we would constitute as talk radio or discussion-based content isn't appealing. That's one of the things that I think people get wrong about, like even what we're doing right now is, well, the younger audience isn't really interested in talk. They're more interested in entertainment. They're interested in music. Especially political talk or religious speech, religious talk doesn't really have a platform. But I think that that's completely wrong. And I think you can kind of testify to that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I do everything on YouTube or Google Podcast, but all of my podcasts are like, they're either true crime based because I'm a millennial, or it's some political or sometimes science themed conversation between two people, which is essentially what talk radio is.
So the notion of talk radio being dead is, in my opinion, a misconception if it's just limited to radio. And this is actually a fascinating thing because it's a conversation that I've had frequently with Josh Brown, the CEO president of his productions, who produces our radio show, just about how effective is talk radio. Talk radio was virtually dead going into the mid 80s. There was a thing known as the Fairness Doctrine, that because AM radio stations are public domain, that the federal government regulated that political speech always had to be balanced and equated based upon time and perspective. So, for Rush Limbaugh to have a 3-hour talk show that's conservative, it was impossible because you would have then also had to have had afterwards a 3-hour talk show that was liberal, but the radio station that was carrying one would just lose money and get hammered on the other, and vice versa. And so, largely speaking, before Rush Limbaugh, AM radio was, for the most part, kind of a dying medium. He resurrected it, changed the landscape. Now, I'm kind of old school. You know that about me. I'm kind of an old soul in a lot of ways.
You did just buy a tea kettle.
I did. So I guess to kind of give a little color commentary to what Creighton's referring to. So my wife and I, the big downside of 2020 is that it has killed television. Like, there's not a lot of really good new content coming out because, COVID shut down the recording, shut down the studio, shut down, the production. And so, right now it's like you're just starving for, your shows to come back. And so we've kind of dug deep into like, well, what shows have we not watched before? And this is probably way more information than the audience cares to know. But we started watching The Mentalist, which I think is a very riveting show. If you're listening, it's clean. It's hard to find clean shows nowadays. I wouldn't necessarily watch it with, anyone maybe under high school age, just because of the subject matter, but it is a clean show. But the main character drinks tea. And so my wife and I, because we've just been binging these episodes, we're like, hey, we should try out tea. And so we bought a tea kettle and an assortment pack off of Amazon and some honey. And I turned to her the other day and I said, I think we're really impressionable people. Like we're the people that when there's product placements in TV and you're like, no one's going to buy that Ford Focus. We end up being the people that are like, yeah, I'm going to buy that Ford Focus or buy a tea kettle. But I'm an old soul. I'm the kind of person that, again, if you've listened to any length of time, I'm a diehard Atlanta Braves fan. I love baseball. Baseball was made for, or you could even say radio was made for baseball. The baseball broadcast, 3 hours of content, but the slow pace of a baseball game when you're only listening requires expert commentators. Because, and the 3-2 pitch, it's a ball outside. He's going to go take his base. And then there's like 2 minutes until the next batter can get up there and the next pitch is made. And so, you listen to broadcasts on the radio of baseball. You get to know the personalities, which is why like Vin Scully is such an iconic, the great Dodger broadcaster. There are times that instead of watching a Braves game on the TV, I'll turn it off and turn on the radio. If I'm sitting outside, I'll turn on the radio and just listen, to the broadcast. There's something just very cool, very unique about it. I'm an old soul in that regard. And while I do consume a lot of media through podcasts and again, me being kind of the younger demographic, also YouTube, similar to you, I am a millennial, on the edge.
Yeah,
but
just
still,
barely.
just barely. But I'm one of those weird people that can relate to Generation X, but I understand millennials. Radio, my first exposure with Rush Limbaugh, and really, I guess I should get to that. That's kind of the subject matter of today's episode. Is I want to talk about Rush Limbaugh. Don't turn me off, because this is not a show about Rush Limbaugh. This will actually be a show that is very much applicational to the everyday Christian. I think that there's some very important lessons that we can derive from Rush Limbaugh. In fact, I'm kind of titling this for our YouTube channel, for Facebook, for the podcast. I'm titling the episode "Talent on Loan from God," which is kind of the famous thing. Rush Limbaugh would open his show, behind the golden EIB microphone, talent on loan from God. Rush Limbaugh, placing one half of my brain behind my back to make it fair. He had this bravado, had this way of doing it. But I really thought about watching a lot of the commentary following his death, listening to some of his friends talk about his life. Mark Stein, of all people, wrote a really moving article. He was a fill-in host for Rush Limbaugh, and his whole, I think that even the title of his piece was "A Talent Returned to God," and it really got me thinking. And so today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about Rush Limbaugh, but I really do want to pivot into some bigger applications that are relevant for all of us as believers. One of the things I do think is very interesting, and I didn't know this about Rush Limbaugh. So Rush Limbaugh, his actual name is Rush Hudson Limbaugh III. He's the third. His grandfather was actually an ambassador, I believe, for FDR to India. His father was a very famous, kind of powerful attorney. He comes from a family of attorneys. His brother David, his older brother David Limbaugh, is an attorney, also a commentator in his own right, author, a thinker. Rush Limbaugh, though, he came from upper to middle class, Midwestern family, born and raised in Missouri. And what's interesting, one of the things I learned about Rush Limbaugh is, again, a well-to-do family, a family of attorneys, conservative attorneys, very politically active. But from the age of 8 years old, I read this in one of his biographies, Rush Limbaugh, at the age of 8, had told his parents that when he grew up, he wanted to be on radio, as an 8-year-old.
And it was cutting technology then, right?
No, not at all. I mean, so Rush Limbaugh, he died at the age of 70. He was born January 12th of 51. So, I guess late 50s, early 60s, you're having more and more televisions make their way into the home. Radio is being supplanted by picture. We're running against a hard break, so I don't want to progress any further. We want to hear from you, the listening audience. You can find all of our contact information, info@outlawradio.org, all of the links to our social media accounts. Just go to outlawradio.org. Again, our website is outlawradio.org.
Yeah, I was just making a joke, cutting technology, because radio came out in 1945, 1930. I don't know. My history's terrible.
No.
Radio was the late 1800s.
No, the telegram was late 1800s.
No, most of the 1920s, the Yankees, people would gather around there. You have the internet right in front of you. You can look that up.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, Calvin Coolidge, let me put myself on the screen. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to be inaugurated on radio. And that was...
But Calvin Coolidge is old.
Calvin Coolidge was the 30th president, 1923 to 1929.
So, but radio was there before that.
Let me just Google radio
instead of Calvin Coolidge.
Well, we're gonna let Creighton. You can do a little bit of research on kind of the history of radio. If you're watching and you know anything about the history of radio, let Creighton know, because apparently we don't
we don't know enough.
We don't know enough. But let me go ahead and just kind of continue my thoughts here. setting the stage about Rush. Now that I killed like 3 minutes talking about The Mentalist and
a tea kettle.
And a tea kettle.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that to be such a rabbit hole. It was just an offhanded joke.
Yeah, but you got to give some context to the listening audience, you know. So it's what has to happen. All right, next block's 12 minutes. Let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. Again, my name is Zach Adams. I'm so glad that you're listening. A week ago today, Rush Limbaugh passed away at the age of 70. February 17th, 2001. He was born January 12th, 51. He died of stage 4 lung cancer in February of 2020. And again, this was right before the pandemic. He had gone in for just a routine checkup and with 0 symptoms, ended up getting a very terrible diagnosis that he had terminal lung cancer. What makes Rush Limbaugh and Creighton is with me. Creighton, again, welcome back to the show.
Hello.
So one of the things that's interesting is that, you know, as an 8-year-old, growing up in middle America in Missouri, you know, there's a lot of things as an 8-year-old you'd want to be. You know, if you want to follow in your father's footsteps, maybe you want to be a lawyer, but that's not fun. That doesn't sound fun. But as an 8-year-old, like my son Quincy is 9, and he wants to be a Major League Baseball player. Now the likelihood of him being a Major League Baseball player is astronomically low. He's a good baseball player, don't get me wrong, but he's just the likelihood is very slim.
The genes aren't there.
The genes are there. I mean, you look at me, I am an athletic specimen. But the problem is he has half of his genetics come from Jessica, who's not exactly the most athletic girl in the world. Beautiful.
That's a bold move, my friend. That's a bold move.
Beautiful, but not exactly uber, uber. Like, for example, like Tiger Woods' son is destined to be a golfer. You know, Charlie Woods is going to be a golfer. He has that strong gene. Rush Limbaugh at the age of 8 wanted to be in radio. And as a result, his parents ragged on it. His parents were not in favor of it. Again, middle to upper class, family of lawyers, connected, radio. To be a radio DJ or a radio talk show host was not exactly what they had in the cards or had envisioned for their 8-year-old son. At the same time, he was passionate. Further illustrated by the fact that when he turned 9, his parents bought him this device that enabled you to broadcast your own radio show on an AM channel with like a 500-foot radius. So like, I don't think they make these things anymore. It's like pirate radio. It's a small bandwidth radio transmitter. And so at the age of 9, wanting to encourage their son and not discourage him, they bought him this little device. And so they would listen to their son do his own radio shows from the bedroom. And he could hear himself on the radio dial. At the age of 16, again, growing up in Missouri, Kansas City, his father was a minority investor in a local radio station. So at the age of 16, he got a break, the non-peak hours, was able to be a DJ, but he was on the radio. Again, it was his love. Rush Limbaugh, I don't know how many people, like he always said that he was born for radio, that it was what he wanted to be. It's what he wanted to do. He wasn't really interested in much else. It was, which is a unique thing. I mean, from a young age, to feel kind of a calling, a passion, and to follow suit with that is commendable. It's noteworthy. And I think it's great that even with parents that maybe not necessarily wanted their kid to be a radio personality, had other visions, were still, that they recognized the seriousness within their son, and they encouraged it, and they were behind it, realizing that you're either going to sink or swim, you're either going to make it or not. And dealing with a child, it's best to let them figure that out on their own than you dictate it, because then they'll rebel against it. Reading his bio, it's fascinating that Rush was, in a lot of ways, kind of the black sheep of the family. His father was a very serious person. His mom was kind of a wild, fun personality, which is really where Rush gets his persona. So much of the seriousness of Rush as kind of the intellectual conservative came from his father, the way he thought things through. But the lighter side of Rush, and if you ever listen to Rush Limbaugh for any length of time, he had a way about him. Like, his show was fun. There was a serious content, but a brevity to the presentation. And Rush always said that, like, in radio, your main job is to get an audience, to entertain an audience. He was an entertainer more than anything, because you need an audience to sell ad revenue. And so his whole, like, he's like, this is a business. My job is to make the best show possible to the widest audience possible, so I can make the most money possible. At the end of his life in radio, he was making, they estimate, $85 million a year was his last contract.
Man, that's a lot of money.
$85 million, which is right behind as far as what you're pulling in from Howard Stern. I mean, he was on 650 radio stations, which is an amazing thing. The EIB network. I mean, his listenership, his audience. I mean, he had the greatest platform. One could have 20 million listeners a week. That transcends, television, prime time. The big five networks. I mean, Rush was such a hated man for his political beliefs because of the ability to influence the audience, the mechanism, the airwaves. 16 years old, gets a break as a local DJ. But Rush, even though he had this passion to be on radio, it didn't work out for years. He ends up being fired from the majority of his first breaks. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Kansas City. Was fired from multiple radio stations for being too controversial, which is like shocker. But he was kind of learning his craft, learning his trade. But he had perseverance. He had tenacity. There was a season in the late 70s to mid 80s where he did leave radio, ends up working as a kind of a ticket promoter for the Kansas City Royals. But he learned advertising. He learned marketing. In 1984, KFBK in Sacramento gave him his first big break. He replaced kind of a legend, was able to do his own talk show, was a radio personality. And then August 1st of 1988, the Rush Limbaugh Show debuted. He moved to New York City. It premiered on ABC, the ABC radio network, started with 56 radio stations. And what's crazy, and again, this is 1988. He's on 56 radio stations. AM radio is a dinosaur. It's largely been left. It's a forgotten medium. Those that do listen to radio, it's all FM. It's all music based. And yet you've got this bombastic political firebrand on the radio, and it took off. Like, Rush Limbaugh single-handedly saved talk radio, saved the radio, and probably in general. I mean, there's a reason that in 1993 he was inducted to the Radio Hall of Fame. And like he would boast, one day there'll probably be an entire wing of the Hall of Fame dedicated to the influence of Rush Limbaugh. One of the things that made him very interesting, again, gets his break at the age of 37, starts with 56 radio stations, but within five years, he became the number one talk show in America, again, reaching a pinnacle of 650 radio stations. Just astonishing as far as the influence and what he was able to accomplish. And one of the unique things is that Rush Limbaugh generally had a policy where he would have no guests, which, again, talk radio at that point was a lot of call-in. It was interviews. Even today, a lot of talk radio is interviews, it's conversation. 3 hours, one guy, one voice, is just really astonishing. He said that the only two people in America that had the right to be interviewed on the Rush Limbaugh Show was the President of the United States or the Speaker of the House. Everybody else was just below, because his whole thing was, people are tuning in not to listen to anybody but me speak. It's my opinions that they're turning into, and he was right. And was one of those people that, and again, if you listen to him, he kind of broke the rule. So there's a rule to radio. that personalities never look like what they sound like. When you listen to Rush Limbaugh, he looks exactly the way that he sounds, like, kind of your Main Street, K Street Republican with slick back hair, big suspenders, suits, wingtips, cigar in his mouth, type of individual. So when you listen to him and you saw him, it matched, it fit, incredible branding. He said, and I'll paraphrase, growing up, that as a kid, he'd sit there while his mom was making breakfast. He would listen to the radio, and he was always bummed out because it sounded like the guy on the radio was going to spend the day having a blast while he'd have to go to prison. And he never wanted to be that growing up. He always wanted to do what he loved. And to his credit, man, the guy had an incredible career, did what he loved, did what was his passion, and died doing it. Again, one of the things that's unique about Rush Limbaugh is that even with stage 4 cancer, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom during the 2000 presidential address, the State of the Union. It's the highest civilian award that can be issued. But even at that point, he didn't think that he was going to live to see the end of the year. Not only did he live through the end of the year, but continued to do shows as long as he could. And that's one of the interesting things that we've kind of learned afterwards, is that when Rush would come in to do a show, he was in bad shape. And yet he endured incredible chemo treatments and was really pushed to the brink because he just wanted one more day with his audience. He loved his audience. He loved what he did. He had a passion for it. And I'll tell you, that's really inspiring because you only have one life to live. And, we always say that you want to work to live. You don't want to live to work, but it's a beautiful thing when your work and your life can blend together, that you get to do what you love to do, meaning you never go to work. It's your passion. It's what you do. And, I think kind of as a testimony, the inspiration of Rush Limbaugh, one of the things we can take away is find what you love and pursue it. And you're going to have setbacks, you're going to fail, you're going to have opposition. But if you love it and you have a passion for it, continue to do it. When we come back, I'm going to bring in kind of the Christian spiritual element to it all. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Outlaw Radio Show.
The one and only Bill Thompson has commented.
Bill Thompson.
Yes.
Bill, it's good to hear from you.
He says 1906, first radio show. It was a Christmas Eve show.
See, I was right. This goes back to the early 1900s. It's exactly what I said.
You said the 1800s.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly. Bill, I appreciate.
So I will acknowledge that I was wrong about the 1930s, but it wasn't the 1800s either.
Well, it's basically the same thing. Turn of the century. Again, I mean, radio. Thank you, Bill. Nick, you got anything? I mean, this is the whole idea of
I got one thing.
Spending your life doing what you love, right?
I hope your wife wasn't watching this show.
It's all good.
I'm just kidding. No,
she doesn't.
It's all good.
Neither of yours do.
And yours,
mine's never will. Said, I hope Jessica's not watching.
Mine's
watching.
Be.
Yours is watching.
Mine is watching.
Oh, no.
I hope Jessica is not watching.
That means my wife got a text message.
Yes, probably so.
Anyway. Thoughts?
No, only thought was right there at the end. I mean, you expounded on it a lot more, but I mean, the man loved what he was doing and kept doing it. He fought through turmoil. He fought through chemo and cancer just to do one more day. He didn't know when the last day was going to come, but it didn't matter to him. He just kept doing what he needed to do.
Apparently they had, and this is one of the things that Mark Stein brought up, is that even like this year when he would come in to do the show, they had a guest host on call on the ready in case he couldn't continue. Because again, 3 hours.
Oh yeah.
3 hours is a long time.
Dude, we do this show for like an hour and a half and I'm young. 3 hours at stage 4 chemo. That sounds awful. Especially
when they said that you were not going to live. I mean, and we'll get into this when we get back to the block, but I mean, how many people can say that they were able to spend their life doing what they loved? I think that's a cool thing. It's a really cool thing.
Not many people that I know of.
Not many people. And sometimes it takes incredible risk to do what you love. and you've got to be prepared for failure and setbacks. But at the same time, there's great joy in doing what you love. Now, I'm kind of painting Rush Limbaugh with kind of one stroke of the brush, or one side of the coin. There's another side to it, because he was very, very full of himself. And it wasn't a shtick. For years when I listened to Rush, and he would say very bombastic, what would come across very prideful, arrogant things about himself. He said that a lot to just tick off the liberals, those that didn't like him anyway. For those of us that listened to him, I always recognize it like this guy's an entertainer. There's an entertainment component to this, where he's creating a persona, a personality. That being said, I think it wasn't a personality. Like, that's who he was, which again is part of the success, because what people want more than anything when it comes to media is authenticity. And, even if you're an arrogant, kind of pompous, sometimes jerk, if you are an authentically pompous, arrogant jerk, your audience, there's a measure of your audience kind of rolling with that, because again, you're not being fake. People want real, even if it comes with the warts. We just don't like, things that are being superficial. And he was that. I ran across one of his ex-wives. She said that, he was married 4 times. We'll get into that.
Hot dang.
Married 4 times, no kids. But one of his ex-wives, I read, she was quoted as saying that she didn't believe Rush would ever get married again, and would definitely never have kids, quote, because he's too much in love with himself. He was asked about that, and he said, I am too much in love with myself. So there was, he was high on life. He was high on himself. But he was also, I think, very tormented, which is one of the things we're going to get into, kind of talking about his relationship with Jesus. And so that's kind of where we're going to go. You guys ready?
Ready.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching. Stay with us. Next block is 11 minutes. 11 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. My name is Zach Adams. I'm joined by Creighton Vaughn. Creighton, thanks for being with me.
Absolutely.
If you join us, we live stream the recording of the show you're listening to. We do this on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Creighton is kind of the man behind the camera. One of the things that's great about it is that as you watch, you can leave comments, questions, feedback. You can interact with me during the show, which is a cool component of doing it live, as opposed to the way that maybe you're listening, which is pre-recorded. And so join us. Again, Creighton, what are the ways that you can watch the live stream?
The 2 best are YouTube and Facebook. They're both live streamed, and if you don't catch it on Wednesdays, they are archived because it's YouTube and Facebook, and you can watch them during the week, or you can go back and watch our entire archive if you like. Leave us a like if you're doing that, because it would be fantastic.
And subscribe. You can find us on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is outlawradio.live. We also stream on our Facebook page, facebook.com/TheRadioOutlaw. We are talking about kind of the life and the legacy of Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh, kind of a radio icon, the pioneer of modern conservative talk radio. Forget about even conservative, just talk radio in general. Even early in his career, his talent was recognized. His pinnacle was swift, pinnacle to the top. In 93, he was inducted to the Radio Hall of Fame. Rush Limbaugh, though, for all of his success, and there was much, was to a degree a bit of a tormented soul. Between blocks, Creighton and I were talking about it, and that Rush, he had this very bombastic, pseudo-arrogant, even prideful persona on the air. Some might have thought it was a shtick. When you study his life, it wasn't. I mean, the man was high on life, but very full of himself. When you study Rush, there was an undercurrent of kind of a tormented soul to an extent. And let me kind of unpack that just a bit. Rush Limbaugh, I mentioned, was born stable family, upper middle class, Midwestern family, a succession of lawyers. His grandfather was a lawyer. His father was a lawyer. His brother David was a lawyer. Rush grew up in a religious home. From what I can tell, they were members of the local Methodist church. Rush grew up going to Sunday school. He knew the Bible stories. He knew of Jesus. And yet it's very difficult to know at what point, Rush really wrestled with his own faith. I don't know at what point Rush had a faith. Rush, one of the things that you took away from listening to his show is that he very much communicated and articulated conservative principles. He was a conservative, and he did so from a very Judeo-Christian ethic. You listened to Rush Limbaugh, and you walked away with the understanding that he did have a religious understanding, that he had a Christian upbringing, but he absolutely never talked about Christianity. He was a political talk show. He never brought in his faith. He never brought in, Christian tenets. He never spoke about those things, leaving the audience largely unsure whether or not Rush was a Christian or whether he wasn't. I'm not sure Rush really knew. Again, Christian upbringing, Christian parents, Christian rearing, but he became very career-driven, career-oriented. Rush ultimately would marry 4 different women, marrying Catherine in the later years, leaving her as his widow. Often articulated that she was the love of his life. Struggled, though, with marriages, struggled with contentment. There was no balance to his life. His life was the radio show. It was his personality. Rush struggled with addiction as a result of complications from a back surgery. He struggled for years with addiction to Oxycontin, opioids. Got into trouble. Actually spent 5 weeks off the radio in rehab. His brother David, interestingly enough, became a born-again believer, an outspoken Christian in the mid-90s. David Limbaugh has written some very good books about Christian apologetics, about defending the faith. I stumbled across an article written by Joel Rosenberg recently. Joel Rosenberg has been friends with Rush Limbaugh for years. Joel Rosenberg is a believer, is a Christian. He's a Jewish man, has written a bunch of best-selling, spy thrillers. Rush became a big fan of the books. They ended up having a friendship. And Joel wrote an article talking about Rush Limbaugh and his faith. Now, one of the things that blew me away, and I'm going to actually take a moment and read a bit of a transcript, again, included in this article written by Joel Rosenberg, October 19th of last year. So the program's kind of titled An Update on My Health. It's a roller coaster. Rush Limbaugh kind of broke from the normal protocol. Again, Radio 101. You don't talk about what you're not, what the listener isn't interested in. So the listeners are tuning into Rush Limbaugh to hear political commentary. So taking time to talk about things that are not related to political commentary runs counter to the business model. And so Rush never talked about, again, Christianity or faith. But October 19th, he's now been dealing with this stage 4 cancer diagnosis for months. Didn't think he was going to even be alive by this point. I happened to listen. I was listening during this section. So let me actually read you the transcript. This is what Rush said. He says, "It's tough to realize that the days where I do not think I'm under a death sentence are over. Now we all are. It's the point. We all know that we're going to die at some point, but when you have a terminal disease diagnosis, that has a time frame to it. Then that puts a different psychological and even physical awareness to it. I wake up every day and I thank God that I did. I go to bed every night praying I'm going to wake up. I don't know how many of you do that. Those of you who are not sick, those of you who are not facing something like I am and countless of other millions are, but it's a blessing when you wake up. It's a stop everything and thank God moment. And every day, thus, in me, feeling more and more blessed, hearing from you, knowing that you're out there praying and everything else you're doing, that's a blessing. It's just a series of blessings, and I'm grateful to be able to come here to the studio, tell you about it, and really maintain as much normalcy as I can. I know a lot of you out there are going through your own challenges, whether it's cancer or another medical illness or some other life change. Maybe even you're in a hospital right now. Someone told me, and I think it's good advice, maybe helpful. The only thing that any of us are certain of is right now, today. That's why I thank God every morning when I wake up. I thank God that I did. I try to make it the best day I can no matter what. I don't look too far ahead. I certainly don't look too far back. I try to remain committed to the idea what's supposed to happen will happen when it's meant to. I mean, at the outset of this, the first day I told you that I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It is of immense value, strength, confidence, and that's why I'm able to remain fully committed to the idea that what is supposed to happen will happen when it's meant to. There's some comfort in knowing that some things are not in our hands. There's a lot of fear associated with that too, but there is some comfort. It's helpful. God is helpful. It's helpful to be able to trust and to believe in a higher plan. So again, let me just thank all of you for your support, your prayers. I send the same to you, to all of you, through anything that you might be facing. So now the objective here is rounding third, not having to head back to second base and slide in there. So here it goes to rounding third and heading towards home. That's the objective. That's the goal. I was listening to this and I was blown away, Creighton. Again, this is a man that never talks about his faith, that you never really were sure if he was a Christian or not, openly in the midst of really, again, the acknowledgement that he's living with a death sentence. He wants to comfort the audience by letting them know that his personal relationship with Jesus Christ is what was comforting him through the trial. It's kind of a powerful statement, especially for someone that kind of breaks total protocol with making such a declaration. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very interesting because you normally with somebody who's that religious but highly political, they would never do anything that could, separate them from their base.
Right. I read the article in its entirety because one of the things not addressed that I found interesting is, okay, he acknowledges here October 19th that he is a Christian, that he's a born again believer, a follower of Jesus, but it was still left kind of mysterious as to, well, when did he give his life to Jesus? Again, a man with a religious upbringing, Christian family, Methodist. When did he become a Christian? Was this something he just always kept on the back burner? Where was it? And you read this article by Joel Rosenberg, and Rosenberg says pretty point blank that his biggest fear for Rush Limbaugh was that he knew he wasn't a Christian, and that Rush deeply struggled with whether or not Jesus was who he said he was, and wrestled with the implications of that, and was uneasy, which is why he was kind of a tormented soul. Don't go anywhere. We're going to pick up this in our final block here on the Outlaw Radio Show.
Yeah, that's I get the growing up in the church and the idea of like, when do you really become a Christian when it's just been your whole life anyway?
Yeah, when it's ingrained in every part of you and everything you do.
Yeah, for sure. Let me finish this up and then because I'm going to kind of bring it home, and I think that's going to open up a lot of conversation. So again, it's taken me a long time to get to, I think, the point of the show, which is where we're about to end up. So 9:45, Craig. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Outlaw Radio Show. I'm talking about Rush Limbaugh. Noteworthy that October of last year, for really the first time that I'm aware of, Rush publicly informed his audience that he was a born-again follower of Jesus Christ, which is a wonderful thing. It makes him our brother in Jesus. It means that while Rush has died, he's not dead, that he is standing before his maker, which we'll get to in a minute because I think there's some implication there. Still, the mystery to me is, well, when did Rush give his life to Jesus? Not that it really matters, but just wondering if, maybe it was this cancer diagnosis that, being diagnosed with terminal stage 4 cancer. Again, that places life into a context, especially when you feel as though you're living under a death sentence. You start thinking about your mortality and what happens next. That's a reason that a lot of people end up making a decision to follow Jesus, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to disparage that whatsoever. But this article written by Joel Rosenberg, who has personal knowledge of this, actually mentions that in 2019, according to what he is aware of, sometime in 2019 is when Rush Limbaugh gave his life to Jesus, which means that he gave his life to Jesus before a cancer diagnosis, before the pandemic, kind of free of all of those influences, which implies that this struggle that this man had wrestled with for decades, he had finally reached a point where he surrendered. That he surrendered to Jesus, and no doubt probably the influence of his brother in his life. It's astounding. They say that, if someone doesn't give their life to Jesus by the age of 18, the likelihood of them doing it later, it decreases like 80%. Like, it's not a normal thing for people late in life to kind of have a total about face, especially when there isn't some big cataclysmic big thing happening, necessitating a reevaluation. So with that in mind, though, I want to bring this home, because I can say something with 100% certainty. Rush Limbaugh lived a very successful life. He lived his dream. He claimed that he was talent on loan from God, and I think that there is some truth to that. What I can say is that today Rush Limbaugh has a lot of regret. And I'm going to try to parse this in two different ways to try to articulate what I mean by that. Rush Limbaugh was a proselyte for conservatism. You know what Rush Limbaugh doesn't care about at all right now? He doesn't care about Republicans. He doesn't care about Democrats. He doesn't care about radio. The only thing that really matters now is he's come face to face with not just his maker, but his Redeemer, who did give him talent on loan from God. From a young age, he was given a passion for radio. Think about the impact that Rush Limbaugh could have made. Not to say that he needed to turn his radio show into, now he's an out, like this Christian thing. It wouldn't have worked. He wouldn't have had the audience. But he never spoke about it. He never incorporated it. It was only later in his life that his life began to have meaning. And I can say with certainty that today he looks back. Who cares now if you're in the Radio Hall of Fame? Who cares the accolades? Who cares if you were given the Presidential Medal of Freedom from a nation that won't be around for eternity? Like, Rush Limbaugh's life and what his life was centered upon has taken on an entirely new perspective today in light of eternity. And I think that there's a lesson in that to us all. Now, I'm not saying, again, that Rush Limbaugh needed to have made his radio show something that it wasn't. There's nothing wrong. He did his passion. He was given a talent. He was given a voice. But I can tell you right now, he regrets the fact that he didn't use his voice, didn't use his platform to make more of an impact for eternity. And where I want to kind of bring this into an application is that you, my friend, have been given a talent. You have been given talent, and that talent has been given to you on loan from God. In Ephesians, Paul says that we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God has predestined before the foundations of the world that we should walk in them. What's interesting is that God created you. He wired you. He gave you your interests and your likes and your abilities. Jesus died to redeem you so that you could then use those things for his service to his end. You know, the interesting thing about the fact that God gives us the ability and then the opportunity is that our work is not then judged upon accomplishment, but on the faithfulness. Did we take the talents that God gave us and did we use them for his glory? Did we utilize the opportunities that God gave us, preordained for us to have? Did we then walk in them? Or did we use those for temporal ends? Again, I can tell you that Rush Limbaugh was very successful. And he was given talent on loan from God. And that talent has returned to God. And there is right now in the heart of that man a deep regret that he didn't use that talent for a greater purpose. Now, I'm not saying that you've got to be the proselyte plumber. Maybe you've been given a talent and that you've got to, be annoying in your career. Maybe you work at a company or you work at a business and you've been given a particular talent. You're an accountant. You're good with numbers. But let me ask, in the course of using that talent for the opportunities that God has presented before you, which might be to provide for your family, to make a living, to pursue a passion, in what ways are those talents also being used in the service of King Jesus? In what ways are you using your talents to make an impact for things that will last much, much longer than the here and now? Unquestionable, Rush Limbaugh was given talent, and that talent was on loan from God. And today, you look back on his life and what a tremendous impact he could have made if he had incorporated that more into his show. Again, I'm not judging the man. Again, him coming to faith later in life explains a lot of his career. But that being said, for us, you've been given talent. We've all been given talent. It's a gift. It's something that God wired. Your creator made you. You didn't make yourself. And we all have intrinsic abilities. We have interests. Where do you think your interests come from? Again, if you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you're created, born again. It's the Holy Spirit of God that's crafting your interests and your pursuits. In the end, we're to walk in them. And we're to store it for ourselves treasure in heaven, where moth and rust can't corrupt, where no one can steal. Talent on loan from God. You have been given talent on loan from God. Are you using it to the glory of God? Creighton, with the 45 seconds or so that we have left, did I bring it home? Did that make a point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to remember that, and there's a passage that I can't remember the
Paraphrase
verbatim.
You're fine.
But it's do all things to the glory of God. It doesn't matter. I think I might actually have verbatim. Anyway, doesn't matter what your talent is. Like, I stock shelves for AutoZone, but I stock shelves to the glory of God. I try and be a light in the stores that I'm in, etc.
And when you do that, when you understand that, it can take what might feel as the mundane and redeem it for a heavenly eternal purpose, where it's like, I stock shelves for a living, but I'm going to stock shelves for Jesus, and I'm going to be a light, which means that this is what I do. It's not necessarily who I am. And I need to see this as an opportunity for something greater. You know what I mean?
Yes. And it makes it way harder to burn out that way because it's not you that's doing it.
It's not you that's doing it. Thanks for being on the show, bud.
Always a pleasure.
Well, you've been listening to the Outlaw Radio Show. If you liked what you heard, I want to encourage you to contact your local Christian radio station and thank them that they're carrying this type of programming in your community. If you are listening on the radio, maybe you weren't able to catch the first half of the show. Every episode is podcasted on Apple, Google, Spotify. You can also watch the live stream recording of the show, of what you're listening to. You can watch Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. from outlawradio.live, which is our YouTube channel, or again, facebook.com/The Radio Outlaw. We love listener feedback, interaction. Our email address is info@outlawradio.org. All of this information you can find at outlawradio.org. Once again, my name is Zach Adams, and I hope you join me again this time next week for more of the Outlaw Radio Show.
I think that's the first time I've ever said the actual company that I work for on the radio. I don't know if I'm going to be in trouble for that or not. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, you just gave him a plug.
I don't think it matters. I don't think it's a thing.
Cool.
We won't repeat it. and I think in truth you mumbled it because I didn't even hear it.
That sounds like me. All right, cool.
I don't think
your boss would be happy.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to worry about it because you mumbled it.
Sweet.
Nick, what do you think of the show?
It was great. I loved it. So I have a weird twist on it.
Bring it. Let's do it.
You're speaking about talent and talent. Everyone's like, what if I don't have a talent? Or like, all I do is stock shelves, and like I go to the store and all I do is stock shelves, and then I go home and I get ready, I make dinner, and I go to bed, and I go back to work. That's my life for the last 15 years. What are my talents? Well, all I could think about during the show was what has happened in your life that you could lead, for an example, like say you've lost a loved one, say you lost a child, say you've been through divorce, say you have been through anything like that. You now have a talent of going through something that someone could go through, that you can now speak to them and guide them through it and lead them to know that Jesus is still there in the end.
You know, it kind of dovetails a little bit off of, you know, kind of the takeaway that you had from, you know, Vinny's testimony a couple weeks ago.
Yes, it does.
Where, you know, it's like, man, what I do gives me opportunities for bigger things. Like, yeah, I'm in construction. I'm running a crew. I'm bumping into various people, but I need to view those as opportunities. Like, is it an accident? Are these the things, like, if God has preordained things for me to walk in and I'm walking in these things, I need to now look for some divine purpose. I do that when the McRib comes out.
You and the McRib,
like when
man.
when the McRib comes out, I see it as a sign from God that I've got to go to McDonald's, and as a result, it's a work that I want to walk in, and so I redeem the time by telling everyone in the fast food that Jesus loves them. I feel like it's my McRib evangelistic outreach.
You know, I've never been with you to the McRib, but I think you might literally do that.
I know, I totally do.
Probably does.
No, I absolutely do. I you know, hey, they have to listen to me. They got the headset on, so they actually have to listen to me. So I get to say whatever I want when I'm ordering.
I like it. You hold them hostage with the love of Jesus. Well, I feel like Paul said something about that somewhere.
I mean, a lot of times
Paul and I thought a lot alike.
A lot of times when I'm talking with people, especially in the field I'm at, just random conversation happens about what they do and blah, 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 where they've been and stuff. When they're talking, hey, we want this thing done. Oh, yeah. And my sister from church was, and I'm like, there's an opportunity right there. Like,
let me give you a real world example, something that happened to me last week.
Yeah.
So I woke up, went through my morning routine, finally got to my phone, and I had missed a call. And there was a name on the caller ID, a name of a guy that I hadn't seen in a few years, hadn't heard from, hadn't seen, had been going to our church, kind of disappeared, dropped off the face of the earth. And I saw I had missed a call earlier that morning from this guy. So I kind of gave it the day, thinking, because sometimes I get voicemails at random times, like it takes a while for the voicemail to finally get through. When it became clear I did not get a voicemail, so I get an unhealthy amount of butt dials, because however your phone is configured, I'm either an ADAMS, so I'm at the top, or I'm a Z, which I'm at the bottom. So if you're accidentally butt dialing, like, it's a good indicator. I probably am the one that you're butt dialing.
Either the first or the last on the list.
I'm first or last on the list. So that's what happens. So I looked down. I was like, this has to be a butt dial. Didn't leave a message. He was trying to get in touch with me. I figured would have left a message, hey, give me a call, or then followed it up with a text message or something of that nature. So just a missed call. And there was that initial moment where I'm thinking, yeah, out of sight, out of mind. Didn't mean to call me. No big deal. And then the Lord kind of spoke to me. He says, well, is that the reason?
What if it's not?
So I called the guy back, and he answered, and he says, hey man, long time, no talk. What's going on? I was like, well, actually, you called me this morning and didn't leave me a message. And I just hadn't heard from you in a long time, and thought, well, I'll call you back and see how you're doing. He goes, oh man, that must have been a butt dial. He goes, I'm sorry about that. How's the fam going? So we talked, asked him how his family was going. And we had this conversation, and I said, well, you going to church anywhere? And he was like, no, we're not, but we should be. He goes, we didn't leave Calvary 316 for any reason. We just got busy. And so I said, well, we're still there, still doing what we do.
Haven't moved.
Haven't moved.
It would be great. It'd be great to see you guys one Sunday and catch up. And he said, and I quote, he goes, you know what? Maybe it wasn't a butt dial. Maybe it was my conscience dialing you. And that we do need to get back in church. I know we do, but maybe it wasn't an accident. And I would say, I don't think it was. Now on my end, I could have easily just had written it off as a coincidence, an accident, not intentional. But I saw it. Well, maybe God is doing something else here. And then what was neat is to see that his initial reaction was, oh, it was a butt dial. But then after a conversation was like, well, maybe it wasn't me that dialed you at all. But that there's something else going on. And I think that's what's fun about walking in faith. For us, we just got to look at, try to view the world differently. Like, instead of, them being random occasions or coincidences, if we represent Jesus, if we're ambassadors for Christ, if we haven't been called home for a reason, what's the reason? And it's not to walk through life aimlessly or without purpose or apart from intention. We just got to be creative. You know what I mean?
And you have to set your mind right. I mean, you have to have your mind set on doing that. Be always conscious of that.
For sure.
What I'm saying. I mean, because you can go throughout the day and not even think about that. But if you wake up in the morning and you actually talk to yourself, pray to the Lord, open opportunities. If those opportunities come that day, it's going to be so much easier for you to just hit on them. Where if you're just waking up in the morning and be like, oh, just another day, you're just going to bypass that.
For sure.
It'd also be really easy for whoever it was that you called to have not thought deeper about the implications of you guys now having a conversation after a random butt dial.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm just moving on with their lives.
If I'm gonna call you back because I felt like the Lord was doing it, I got nothing to lose at that point.
Yep.
So you better believe that I'm gonna bring something. Like, there's gonna be some, well, do you bring up where you're going to church or? No, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I might never talk to you again. So again, what do I have to lose? I won't talk to you again until you butt dial me again.
That is definitely one of your talents, being weirdly blunt and forceful with conversation topics.
Well, sometimes that's what you just have to do. Anyway, I do probably need to just interject here very quickly. Did get a text message from
your wife,
from Miss Jessica Adams.
Oh no.
She said, and I quote, for not being, quote, athletic, end quote, I am sure more motivated and active than you.
Oh,
dig.
Snap.
I mean,
she
has
true.
wrong.
She has a point.
No, that's absolutely, I mean, you can't really argue. You can't really argue with that. So anyway, you guys got anything else?
Jennifer says, might see you Sunday. Still up in the air. Great show as always.
Well, thank you.
We
Jennifer.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, anyway, why don't you guys say goodbye?
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, thanks for being with us. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m. We'll do it again.